Dear listeners, welcome to History with Herodotus on the Boxer Rebellion. Today we embark on a fascinating journey through the tumultuous landscape of late 19th century China, where the whispers of discontent eventually erupted into one of the most pivotal uprisings in modern history. The Boxer Rebellion, a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, was more than just a fleeting moment of chaos. It was the culmination of centuries-old tensions, foreign interventions, and internal strife. As we delve into the earliest history of this rebellion, let us transport ourselves to the bustling streets of Beijing, circa 1898. The air is thick with the smell of incense and smoke from the countless opium dens that line the city's narrow alleys. The once mighty Qing dynasty, now in its twilight years, struggles to maintain control over a population increasingly disillusioned with foreign influence and economic hardship. The streets are filled with the sounds of hawkers selling their wares, the clang of hammering on metal, and the murmur of conversations in hushed tones. It was amidst this backdrop of discontent that the Boxers, a mystical and nationalist movement, began to take shape. In the rural provinces of Shandong and Hebei, secret societies and martial arts clubs had long been incubating anti-foreigner sentiment. The Big Sword Society, for example, had been active in the region since the 1860s, advocating for the expulsion of foreign missionaries and the restoration of traditional Chinese values. These early stirrings would eventually coalesce into the Boxer movement, with its distinctive blend of martial arts, spirit possession, and nationalist fervor. One key figure in the emergence of the Boxers was Cao Fuqian, a charismatic leader who claimed to possess supernatural powers. In 1895, Cao founded the Spirit Boxers, a group that emphasized the importance of spiritual purification and physical training. The Spirit Boxers quickly gained popularity among disillusioned peasants and workers, who saw in them a means of resisting foreign domination and restoring Chinese pride. As the Boxer movement grew in strength and numbers, it began to attract attention from the Qing authorities. In 1898, the Empress Dowager Cixi, who had long been suspicious of foreign influence, began to secretly support the Boxers, seeing in them a potential means of bolstering her own power and legitimacy. This fateful alliance would have far-reaching consequences, as the Boxers' anti-foreigner sentiment and violent tactics eventually sparked a full-blown rebellion. The Boxer movement also drew inspiration from earlier rebellions and uprisings, such as the Taiping Rebellion, which had shaken the Qing dynasty in the mid-19th century. The Taiping rebels, with their emphasis on social justice and their rejection of traditional authority, had created a sense of precedent for later movements like the Boxers. The Boxers, however, were distinct in their focus on anti-foreigner sentiment and their use of spiritual practices, such as spirit possession and healing rituals, to mobilize support. As we explore the earliest history of the Boxer Rebellion, it becomes clear that the movement was not an isolated phenomenon, but rather part of a broader pattern of anti-foreigner sentiment that had been building in China for decades. The Qing dynasty's weakness and corruption, combined with the encroachment of foreign powers, had created a sense of national crisis among many Chinese. The Boxers, with their emphasis on traditional values and their rejection of foreign influence, tapped into this sense of discontent, offering a vision of a renewed and purified China Daotie. As we conclude our examination of the origins of the Boxer Rebellion, we stand at the threshold of a maelstrom that would soon engulf China and draw in the great powers of Europe. The stage is set for a dramatic confrontation, one that will test the mettle of empires and shape the course of modern Chinese history. Join me as we venture deeper into this pivotal moment in history and uncover the intricate complexities of the Boxer Rebellion's most tumultuous period. Dear listeners, welcome back to History with Herodotus on the Boxer Rebellion. By the summer of 1900, the Boxer movement had gained significant momentum, with thousands of followers flocking to Beijing to support their cause. The city was a powder keg waiting to be ignited. On June 17, 1900, the Boxers launched a series of attacks on foreign legations and Christian missionaries, marking the beginning of the rebellion. The violence was brutal and indiscriminate, with Boxer fighters targeting anyone perceived as a foreigner or a collaborator. As the situation spiraled out of control, the Qing authorities struggled to maintain order. Empress Dowager Cixi, who had initially supported the Boxers, now found herself caught between her loyalty to the movement and her duty to protect the foreign diplomats and their families. Meanwhile, the great powers of Europe, including Britain, France, Germany, and Japan, began to mobilize their military forces to intervene in the crisis. One of the most pivotal events of the rebellion took place on June 20, 1900, when the Boxers laid siege to the foreign legations in Beijing. The diplomats and their families were trapped, with limited supplies and no clear means of escape. The situation was desperate, with Boxer fighters attempting to breach the compound walls and set fire to the buildings. In response to the crisis, an international coalition of troops, known as the Eight-Nation Alliance, was formed to relieve the siege and restore order in Beijing. The alliance consisted of soldiers from Austria-Hungary, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Russia, Britain, and the United States. On August 14, 1900, the alliance launched a decisive attack on the Boxer positions, breaking the siege and capturing key locations throughout the city. The aftermath of the rebellion was marked by widespread destruction and chaos. The Boxer movement was all but destroyed, with many of its leaders either killed or forced into exile. The Qing dynasty, weakened by the crisis, was eventually forced to sign the Boxer Protocol, a treaty that imposed harsh penalties and concessions on China. The protocol marked the beginning of a new era of foreign dominance in China, as the great powers of Europe carved up the country into spheres of influence. As we explore this tumultuous period in Chinese history, it becomes clear that the Boxer Rebellion was not simply a rebellion against foreign influence, but also a complex struggle for power and identity within Chinese society. The Boxers' emphasis on traditional values and their rejection of foreign culture reflected a deeper sense of unease and dislocation among many Chinese, who felt that their country was being torn apart by external forces. The rebellion also had significant consequences for the great powers of Europe, who were forced to confront the limits of their own power and the complexities of intervening in Chinese affairs. The Boxer Rebellion marked a turning point in the history of imperialism, as the great powers began to recognize the need for more nuanced and collaborative approaches to international relations. As we conclude our examination of the heart of the rebellion, we stand at the threshold of a new era in Chinese history, one that would be shaped by the complex interplay between foreign influence, internal strife, and the struggle for national identity. Join me as we venture deeper into this pivotal moment in history and uncover the intricate complexities of the Boxer Rebellion's enduring legacy. Dear listeners, welcome back to History with Herodotus on the Boxer Rebellion. As we conclude our journey through this pivotal moment in Chinese history, we find ourselves in the aftermath of the rebellion, where the consequences of the Boxer Protocol would shape the course of China's future for decades to come. The Boxer Protocol, signed on September 7, 1901, was a treaty imposed on China by the Eight-Nation Alliance, consisting of Austria-Hungary, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Russia, Britain, and the United States. The protocol marked the beginning of a new era of foreign dominance in China, as the great powers carved up the country into spheres of influence. China was forced to accept significant territorial concessions, including the transfer of sovereignty over various ports and territories to foreign powers. One of the most significant consequences of the Boxer Protocol was the imposition of massive indemnities on China, totaling over 450 million taels of silver. This amount was staggering, equivalent to approximately $750 million at the time, and would be paid over a period of 39 years. The indemnities were used to compensate foreign powers for their losses during the rebellion, as well as to cover the costs of maintaining foreign troops in China. The Boxer Protocol also led to significant reforms within China, aimed at modernizing the country's institutions and infrastructure. The Qing dynasty was forced to establish a new Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as to reform its educational system and promote Western-style learning. These reforms would ultimately contribute to the downfall of the Qing dynasty, as they created a new class of educated Chinese who were exposed to Western ideas and became increasingly disillusioned with the old imperial order. The aftermath of the Boxer Rebellion also saw a significant increase in foreign influence within China as missionaries, traders, and diplomats flooded into the country. Many Chinese began to see foreigners as a corrupting influence, and anti-foreigner sentiment continued to simmer just below the surface. This tension would eventually boil over into the nationalist movements of the 1920s and 1930s, which would play a significant role in shaping China's future. As we explore this period in Chinese history, it becomes clear that the Boxer Rebellion was not simply a rebellion against foreign influence, but also a complex struggle for power and identity within Chinese society. The rebellion marked a turning point in the history of imperialism, as the great powers began to recognize the need for more nuanced and collaborative approaches to international relations. In the years following the Boxer Rebellion, China would continue to struggle with the legacy of foreign domination, as it sought to rebuild and redefine itself in the face of internal strife and external pressure. The rebellion's impact can still be felt today, as China continues to navigate its complex relationships with the rest of the world. As we conclude our journey through the Boxer Rebellion, we are left with a profound appreciation for the complexity and nuance of this pivotal moment in Chinese history. The rebellion was a defining moment in the country's struggle for independence and self-determination, and its legacy continues to shape China's relationships with the world today. Join me next time on History with Herodotus as we explore more fascinating stories from the annals of history. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.